My beloved child. You are listening to this at a moment when everything feels normal, familiar, safe, and steady, yet there is a silent crack running beneath the floor you stand on, a crack that did not appear overnight, a crack that has been growing quietly while you were busy surviving, adjusting, trusting, and believing that tomorrow would look just like today, because the most dangerous losses never announce themselves loudly, they whisper, they wait, and they let you feel comfortable first, and the home you are living in right now, the walls that know your voice, the corners that have memorized your footsteps, the roof that has heard your prayers and your arguments and your tired sighs, is connected to a decision, a pattern, and a truth that has been ignored for far too long, and tonight you are going to feel something unusual, not fear, not panic, but recognition, because deep down you already sense that something was off, something unfinished, something unresolved, and the reason you are still watching is because your instincts are waking up, telling you that this is not just a story, this is a mirror, and mirrors do not shout, they simply reflect what has been standing behind you all along. Listen carefully now, because what you are about to hear is not about fate, luck, or chance, it is about sequence, cause, and consequence, the kind that unfolds slowly and politely until one day it asks for everything at once, and the reason this feels uncomfortable is because comfort was built on delay, not security, and many people lose their home long before they lose the building, they lose it when responsibility is postponed, when warnings are softened, when paperwork is assumed to be harmless, when silence is mistaken for stability, and when trust is given without verification, because the truth is not cruel, it is precise, and precision does not care about emotions, it only cares about alignment, and right now your alignment is slightly off, not broken, not destroyed, just misaligned enough to trigger a chain you did not expect, and that chain is already in motion, even if nothing looks different yet, even if the lights still turn on, even if the door still locks behind you, even if your name still feels attached to this place. There is a moment in every life where a small detail becomes the turning point, not because it is dramatic, but because it was overlooked, and the detail here is not what you did wrong, it is what you assumed was handled, because assumptions are quiet agreements we make with uncertainty, and uncertainty always collects interest, and what you are facing now is accumulated interest, layered over months, maybe years, of routine, compromise, and trust placed in systems, people, or promises that never fully explain themselves, and the most shocking part is not that something can be taken away, it is how calmly it can happen, with notices that sound polite, with language that feels formal, with timelines that look reasonable until they are not, and by the time urgency becomes visible, options have already narrowed, and the home you thought was permanent starts feeling temporary, not because someone is attacking you, but because reality is correcting a mismatch that was allowed to exist. Stay with me, because this is where most people look away, they distract themselves, they tell themselves they will deal with it later, they minimize the signs, they replay reassuring thoughts, and they wait for clarity to arrive without confrontation, but clarity never arrives uninvited, it must be claimed, and the reason this message matters now is because you are standing exactly at the edge where awareness can still reverse momentum, where attention can still change outcome, where understanding can still protect what matters most, and the shock you feel is not meant to paralyze you, it is meant to focus you, because homes are not just structures, they are proof of continuity, proof that effort had direction, proof that you were building something that could hold you, and the idea of losing that feels personal because it is personal, not emotionally, but structurally, And once you understand the real reason this threat exists, you will realize it was never random, it was predictable, and predictability means preventable, but only if you are willing to see the full picture without denial. And here is the truth that almost no one tells you directly: the home you are living in is connected to agreements you did not fully read, timelines you did not question, responsibilities you assumed were shared, and protections you believed were automatic, and none of those things are evil or malicious, they are simply incomplete, and incompletion always creates vulnerability. And vulnerability always waits for the exact moment you are most distracted to reveal itself, and that moment is now. Not to scare you, not to overwhelm you, but to wake you up, because the next part of this story will reveal the single decision that quietly placed this home at risk, a decision that did not feel dangerous when it was made, a decision that millions make every year without realizing its weight, and when you hear it, you will understand why this warning feels so specific, so personal, and so impossible to ignore. Before you dismiss this as coincidence, pause for a second and feel what is happening inside you right now, because this part is where comfort starts slipping and clarity begins to hurt, and that discomfort is not a weakness, it is a signal, because the real danger was never sudden loss, it was slow permission given every time you said, "It will be fine," every time you trusted without checking, every time you chose peace over precision, and the shocking truth is this: the system surrounding your home does not operate on emotion, memory, or effort, it operates on records, timelines, and compliance, and the moment any one of those drifts even slightly out of order, the protection you think exists becomes conditional, not guaranteed, and most people only realize this when the tone of communication changes, when friendly words turn formal, when reminders become notices, and when silence suddenly feels heavier than noise. Here is the revelation that makes people stop breathing for a second: the home you live in is not only held by walls and ownership, it is held by continuity, and continuity can be broken without drama, without confrontation, without warning, simply by neglecting one repeating obligation that feels too small to matter, and this is where millions fail, because repetition creates invisibility, and invisibility creates neglect, and neglect creates vulnerability, and vulnerability never announces itself until it is activated, and when it is activated, it does not care how long you lived there, how much you sacrificed, or how emotionally attached you are, it only cares whether every requirement was met exactly as expected, not approximately, not mostly, not eventually, and this is the part that feels unfair until you realize fairness was never part of the agreement, clarity was. You might be wondering why this is happening now and not before, why the timing feels so precise, so disruptive, and so personally targeted, and the answer is unsettlingly simple: thresholds have been crossed, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, one after another, until the margin that once protected you disappeared, and margins are invisible until they are gone, and when they vanish, everything feels sudden even though nothing was rushed, and this is why people say it came out of nowhere, when in reality it came from everywhere, from every delay, every assumption, every later, every moment where attention drifted away from the foundation and focused only on survival, growth, or distraction, because foundations do not demand attention, they demand maintenance. Do not look away now, because this is the exact point where awareness becomes power, and ignorance becomes cost, and the reason this message feels intense is because intensity is required to cut through normalization, because you normalized risk without realizing it, and normalization is the most effective disguise danger can wear, and the home you fear losing is not being targeted, it is being processed. And processing feels cold because it is designed to be neutral, not cruel, not kind, just efficient, and efficiency does not pause for personal stories, it moves forward unless something interrupts it, and interruption only happens when understanding turns into action, not panic, not denial, but informed, precise action. And now understand this clearly, because this sentence carries weight. The reason you are still here, still listening, still focused, is because the outcome is not sealed yet, but the window is not wide either, and what comes next will expose the exact mechanism that placed this home at risk in the first place, the single overlooked factor that connects paperwork to possession, routine to residence, and silence to surrender. And when you recognize it, you will feel a mix of shock and relief. Shock because it was closer than you thought, and relief because clarity always arrives with choice, and the next part will force you to confront that choice directly, without confusion, without noise, and without escape. There is a sentence you have probably never spoken out loud, yet it has guided more of your decisions than you realize, and that sentence is this: someone else is handling it, because delegation feels like relief, and relief feels like safety, but safety built on distance is fragile, and this is where the invisible switch was flipped, not by a mistake, not by negligence, but by trust placed without structure. And the shocking realization is that responsibility does not disappear when it is shared, it multiplies, and if even one link in that shared chain weakens, the entire structure begins to lean, quietly at first, politely at first, until the lean becomes a direction, and direction becomes momentum, and momentum does not ask whether you are ready. What most people never understand is that homes are not lost through dramatic confrontations, they are lost through quiet confirmations, signatures that felt routine, renewals that felt automatic, clauses that felt harmless, and deadlines that felt flexible, and flexibility is only real when both sides agree to it in writing, not in tone, not in intention, not in memory. And the moment one side moves strictly by record while the other moves by assumption, imbalance begins, and imbalance always resolves itself in favor of structure, not sentiment, and this is why emotion feels so helpless in these moments, because emotion does not exist in ledgers, files, or systems, only compliance does. You may now be sensing the deeper truth, that the risk was not created by a single event, but by a pattern of minimization, where small warnings were reinterpreted as non-urgent, where silence was mistaken for approval, and where the absence of immediate consequence was treated as proof of safety, and this is the most dangerous misunderstanding of all, because absence of consequence is not confirmation, it is delay, and delay is not forgiveness, it is accumulation, and accumulation always reveals itself at the worst possible moment, when attention is elsewhere and resilience is already stretched thin. Here is the part that feels almost unbelievable: the system does not need to be against you to move forward without you, it only needs to be unchallenged, and unchallenged processes continue automatically, step after step, until the final step feels sudden even though it was scheduled long ago, and this is why people feel blindsided, because they never stepped into the process early enough to change its direction, and direction, once set, does not bend easily, it requires deliberate interruption, and interruption only happens when awareness turns into engagement, not emotion, not hope, but action aligned with understanding. And now you are standing at the threshold of the most important realization yet: the reason this home feels at risk is not because you failed, it is because you were absent from a critical layer of ownership that does not feel emotional, visible, or urgent, but is absolute, and once you see that layer clearly, you will understand exactly where leverage still exists, where correction is still possible, and where time still has meaning, and the next part will reveal the precise moment where this path can either be corrected or confirmed, a moment so ordinary that it is overlooked every day, yet powerful enough to decide whether a home remains a place of continuity or becomes a lesson learned too late. Right now, you may feel a strange mix of urgency and disbelief, because the moment that changed everything did not feel important when it happened, and that is exactly why it worked, because danger rarely arrives as danger, it arrives as normal, routine, familiar, and easy to ignore, and the moment in question was not dramatic, not loud, not emotional, it was administrative, procedural, and boring. The kind of moment people rush through just to get back to life, and yet that single moment quietly decided whether control stayed in your hands or slowly slipped away, because control is not lost through force, it is surrendered through inattention, one unchecked detail at a time. Understand this carefully now, because this is where the truth sharpens. Ownership is not a feeling, it is a condition, and conditions must be continuously satisfied, not remembered, not assumed, not intended, and when even one condition is treated as secondary, the entire structure begins to depend on tolerance instead of right, and tolerance is temporary by nature, it exists only until policy tightens, timelines update, or oversight activates, and when that happens, the space you believed was yours begins to feel conditional, not because it suddenly changed, but because you finally noticed the terms you were living under all along. This is why the warning feels delayed, because the process was patient, and patience can be mistaken for permission, but patience is not approval, it is preparation, and while you were living your life, adapting, surviving, planning forward, the mechanism governing your home was moving forward too, silently, neutrally, efficiently, and the most unsettling part is that nothing in that mechanism is emotional or personal. It does not see memories, it does not see effort, it does not see attachment, it sees alignment or misalignment, nothing more, nothing less, and misalignment, once documented, follows a predetermined path. Do not confuse this with inevitability, because inevitability only exists when awareness arrives too late, and you are not there yet, not now, not at this moment, because awareness has arrived early enough to matter, and that is why this message feels heavy, because it carries responsibility back into your hands, and responsibility always feels heavier than comfort. But it is also the only thing strong enough to change direction, because direction changes only when someone steps in and refuses to remain invisible to the process that governs them. Here is what you must hold on to as you move forward. The home you fear losing is not gone, but it is being evaluated, and evaluation is a pause that can either become a verdict or a reset, depending on what happens next, and the next part will reveal the exact action point that separates recovery from regret, the precise area where attention creates leverage, and once you understand it, you will realize this was never about loss, it was about presence, about stepping fully into a role you thought you already occupied, but had not yet fully claimed. This is the moment where stories usually end, but this one does not, because endings only happen when people stop paying attention, and you are still here, still listening, which means something inside you already knows that awareness has shifted, and when awareness shifts, outcomes change, because the truth you are facing now is not meant to frighten you, it is meant to position you, and positioning is power when used correctly, because what threatens your home is not speed, it is inertia, and inertia only wins when nothing interrupts it. Let this sink in deeply, the most critical leverage point is not outside you, it is not hidden, and it is not dramatic, it is your presence in the process that governs your living space, presence that asks questions instead of assuming answers, presence that verifies instead of trusting blindly, presence that responds instead of delaying, because systems respect engagement, not emotion, and the instant engagement appears, pathways reopen, timelines soften, and options re-emerge, not because someone feels sympathy, but because alignment has been restored. Here is the once-in-a-lifetime realization that changes everything. The same mechanism that can move forward without you can also pause for you, but only if you step into it deliberately, and most people never do. They wait for clarity to come to them, but clarity only responds to those who approach it, and this is why some recover while others regret, not because of intelligence, not because of luck, but because of timing, and timing favors those who act before silence becomes final. Notice how different this feels now compared to the beginning, because fear narrows vision, but understanding expands it, and expansion creates choice, and choice is the real protection you were missing, not comfort, not routine, not familiarity, but conscious participation, because homes are not protected by hope, they are protected by attention, and attention is the one thing that can still be applied without delay, without conflict, and without loss of dignity. Carry this with you into the next moment, because what comes next will connect everything you have heard into one clear, undeniable picture, and when that picture forms, you will understand exactly why this warning arrived now, why you stayed until this point, and why the final step is not about fighting, escaping, or fearing, but about claiming what was always meant to be secured through awareness. And the next part will seal that understanding in a way that cannot be ignored. There comes a quiet moment when everything finally aligns, not because the danger vanished, but because understanding stepped into the light, and this is that moment, where confusion dissolves and purpose sharpens, because now you see that the threat to your home was never a single event waiting to strike, it was a signal waiting to be interpreted, and interpretation changes response, and response changes outcome. And that is why this part matters more than all the others, because it transforms awareness into resolve, and resolve into direction, and direction into stability that is no longer accidental, but intentional. What you must realize now is deeply grounding. Security is not the absence of risk, it is the presence of readiness, and readiness does not mean panic or haste, it means clarity backed by calm action, because the moment you fully occupy your role, the process that once felt distant begins to reflect your presence, communication shifts, timelines breathe, and possibilities reopen, not magically, not emotionally, but logically, because systems respond to alignment, and alignment begins the instant you refuse to remain passive in matters that define your foundation. This is where the emotional weight lifts, not because everything is solved, but because helplessness has been replaced with agency, and agency is the antidote to fear, because fear thrives where choice feels absent, and now choice has returned, not as a promise, but as a responsibility, and responsibility is not a burden when it protects what matters, it is a privilege, the privilege of steering instead of drifting, of deciding instead of reacting, of standing present instead of hoping things resolve themselves. Understand this final truth with absolute clarity: the home you live in is not just a place you occupy, it is a reflection of how fully you engage with your own life structures, and when engagement becomes conscious, protection becomes stronger, not weaker, because nothing valuable is preserved by distance, it is preserved by attention, consistency, and informed participation. And these are not qualities reserved for experts or authorities, they are available to anyone willing to step forward and claim them. And as this part closes, let this understanding settle without urgency, without fear, and without doubt, because what you have gained here is not just insight, it is positioning, and positioning shapes outcomes long before results appear, and now you know why this message reached you, why you stayed until the end, and why the story does not end in loss, but in awareness that arrived in time, strong enough to protect what you call home. There is a calm that arrives only after truth has been faced, not avoided, and this calm is different from comfort, because comfort can be fragile, but clarity is solid, and what you are feeling now is clarity settling into place, the kind that does not rush, does not shout, and does not beg for reassurance, because it knows where it stands, and when you stand in clarity, the ground beneath you stops shifting, even if the world around you continues to move. This is where many people misunderstand the ending. They think resolution means everything becomes easy, but real resolution means you become steady, and steadiness changes everything, because a steady presence commands respect in systems that once felt distant, confusing, or overwhelming, and when steadiness replaces hesitation, conversations change, responses change, and outcomes begin to reflect that internal shift, not because someone is being generous, but because alignment has been restored where it was missing. Let this truth anchor itself deeply. Nothing that matters is protected by avoidance, and nothing valuable is preserved by hoping someone else will notice in time, because time does not notice, it moves, and it carries forward whatever is placed within it. Awareness moves with it, ignorance moves with it, action moves with it, and inaction moves with it too, and now you understand that staying present is not exhausting, it is stabilizing, because presence replaces anxiety with direction. Notice how the story no longer feels like a warning, but like a transition, because warnings belong to the unaware, and transitions belong to those who see clearly, and you see clearly now, not because everything was explained, but because enough was revealed to change your posture from passive to engaged, from reactive to prepared, and preparation is the quiet strength that keeps foundations intact even when pressure appears. And as this part closes, hold on to this certainty: your home is not defined by fear of loss, it is defined by conscious guardianship, by the willingness to stay involved, informed, and attentive, and that willingness is not dramatic or loud, it is consistent, grounded, and powerful, and with it, you are no longer someone waiting for an outcome, you are someone shaping it, calmly, deliberately, and fully aware.